If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. Now, that said, I know that TBA and Tariq are also going to be speaking on this subject, no doubt. But I also wanted to make sure that I chimed in as well. I think it's important that three of the most important thought leaders of the black media go ahead and have our say on this. This is something very important because of the fact that it shows that this is the impact that the black grassroots is having. That Donald Trump felt compelled that he had to come up with some little lame-brained PR stunt claiming that he's reaching out to black votes. See, this is somebody who thinks that they're going to ride on the wave that the black media has established and been pushing. And the idea is to pull a con game. Oh, well, we see what those black people online have been doing and the problems they've been causing white supremacy as of late. They've been having an impact on the process. I know what I'll do is I'll say, here's a plan for black America. I'm going to say black people specifically. I'll say black people a few times and that's going to make their hearts go pitter-pat. And they're going to say, you know what? Maybe we should consider this Trump guy. Meanwhile, he's loaded his so-called proposal with all kinds of weasel words, bait and switch language, trap doors. I mean, it's just a doggone cornucopia of Trojan horses. But before we go any farther, I couldn't help but notice that Trump's plan for black America, his platinum plan, you know, I've heard this before from another New Yorker who was also seeking the presidency not so long ago. Our good friend Mike the Bigot Bloomberg, before we sent that scumbag packing. You'll recall that he was also talking about how he too had a plan for economic justice for black America. See, he was using the language that was put forward by the left arm of white supremacy's black operatives. They were supposed to be speaking for us. You know, the D.Ray McKesson crowd and such. And so he decided that he was going to go to the black churches, like Brown Chapel AME Church in Selma. And he figured that he was going to have the black clergy and some bought and paid for black bootlick mayors like Mayor Sylvester in Houston, among others. That he was going to get himself some black flunkies to get out there and say, y'all got to support Mike Bloomberg now. He's giving us plenty of money to endorse him. He's giving us plenty of reason to endorse him. That's what he tried, and as we all know, his lame-brain presidential bid crashed and burned. And we had a huge amount to do with that while the white media was saying that Mike Bloomberg's stop and frisk policy doesn't seem to be hurting him with black voters at all. And then as soon as he went to Brown Chapel AME Church, the congregation turned their backs on him. The very next day, he bowed out of the race. And the reason I'm starting with Bloomberg's plan first is because I just want to see if you notice a pattern forming later on as we discuss Trump's platinum ploy for black America. Now with Bloomberg, the first plank of his plan was create generational wealth through ownership. Apparently his plan was he was going to create 1 million new black homeowners by providing down payment assistance. Sounds like a loan to me. Getting millions banked and recognized by credit scoring companies. Enforcing fair lending laws, reducing foreclosures and evictions, and increasing the supply of affordable housing. Now, the first thing that ought to come to anyone's mind, if you got even common sense, you should be asking, hey, what's the last job that Bloomberg had? Oh yeah, he was mayor of New York City. Just out of curiosity, clearly being mayor is a more manageable number of people to govern than being president of the United States. So let's look at New York City and see how good a job Bloomberg did when it came to creating black homeowners in New York City. Did he make sure to provide black homeowners with down payment assistance in New York City? Did he get black New Yorkers banked and recognized by credit scoring companies? Did he have any initiatives for that? Did he enforce the fair lending laws in New York City for black homeowners? Did he reduce foreclosures and evictions for black homeowners in New York City? Did he increase the supply of affordable housing for black New Yorkers? We already know the answer to that one. He didn't do a damn thing. So if he did absolutely zero for black homeowners in New York City, what makes you think that he's suddenly going to decide, well, you know what, maybe I should do it for the black people nationwide? You have to be an idiot to believe that one. Well, you have to be an idiot, or you have to be one of these bought and paid for black bootlicks for the left. So already we see that Mike Bloomberg has a proven track record of not doing a damn thing for black people. Next, Bloomberg's next policy proposal was spur the creation of more than 100,000 new black-owned small businesses. Again, I'm going to look at black New Yorkers and see how well Bloomberg did by them. Did he spur the creation of even 10,000 black-owned small businesses in New York City? New York has one of, if not the largest enclave of black people in the United States. Should be child's play for Bloomberg to be going to the black community. There's going to be thousands of black businesses by the time I'm done. He didn't do that, though he did make sure that there were plenty of means for black people to leave New York City. Now that Bloomberg did do. Didn't do anything for black home ownership in New York City, or to increase the supply of affordable housing for black New Yorkers, or to spur the creation of more black-owned businesses, though he did make it a hell of a lot easier for black people to leave. In fact, he made it so easy, they were forcing black people out. Now that Bloomberg did do. Next, he puts in, commit $70 billion in neighborhoods that need it most. So his plan was a $70 billion plan. This is for the entire United States of America. $70 billion. I'm not even sure if that would be enough for black people in New York City. But he thinks for the entire United States of America, $70 billion, yeah, that ought to cover it. Okay, what does it cover? Well, what it covers is investments. Now, keep in mind, you get all this vague language, funding and technical support. What the hell does that even mean? Oh, we're going to address disparities in early childhood. Again, words so vague as to mean anything or nothing at all. Schools, higher education, skills and training, employment, health, and environmental conditions. See, this is a lot of talk, but not actually saying anything. Can you tell me specifically what the hell this means? Can anyone tell me what the hell this means? Next, he says, we're going to address systematic discrimination. Well, it makes sense that Bloomberg would address systematic discrimination. After all, he bragged about how there need to be more black men stopped and frisked in New York City when he was asked about it. So if anybody ought to know about systematic discrimination, it should be Bloomberg. He's an expert on it. He was one of the main people pushing and promoting it. But if we were dumb enough to put Mike Bloomberg in the White House, why, he was going to reinvigorate the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. Can anybody tell me the last time that the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department did anything to protect black people or to punish white supremacists? This phony baloney reputation that the Civil Rights Division has is largely an illusion created out of the murders of Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney back in the 60s. But even if we want to go ahead and give the Civil Rights Division all the credit for that, it's been a hell of a long time since they've had any wins, don't you think? That was 50 plus years ago. What the hell have they done for us lately? There's been a hell of a lot of abuses and attacks on black people, both by private individuals and by government officials since the 60s, and the Civil Rights Division ain't done a damn thing about it. Reinvigorate them? They were never invigorated in the first place. Then he goes on to scribble, require more transparency from companies in their hiring, pay, lending, and procurement practices. Notice the wording. Require more transparency. Nowhere does he say anything about punishment. When it comes to these businesses, when it comes time to talk about the institutions of white supremacy, when it comes time to talk about things that are going to be affecting white people, the word punishment never comes up. Not even a hint of punishment. Instead, it's, well, we're going to require more transparency. Yeah, you can give us data on how badly you've been screwing black people over. We don't require that you do anything about us. Just make sure that you don't do anything about it. Just give us more accurate data so we can all laugh about it. Yeah, we've been knocking these niggers dead for years, haven't we? Yeah, this is just how badly they're getting run roughshod over. That's what that is. We like to have a more accurate count of how many black people you've been screwing over. Mike's plan also ties federal housing funding to progress in reducing segregation. Well, if he's not going to be punishing segregation, he just wants a more accurate count. What the hell does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. Requires implicit bias training for police. No punishment for the police. We're not going to punish the thugs with badges. Instead, we think they should have sensitivity training. Yeah, I'm sure they'll be real sensitive when they're gunning black people down the streets. This was Mike Bloomberg's proposal for economic justice for Black America. This is what Mike Bloomberg thought constituted a real plan, and I guess it just surprised the hell out of him why it was that Black America wasn't going for it. And the reason that I went ahead and started with Mike Bloomberg first is because I just want to do a compare and contrast. I'm just curious if when we start looking at Donald Trump's platinum ploy for Black America, whether or not I'm going to be hearing similar things, similar vagaries and indistinct talk, and absolutely no mention of punishment for those who have been harming, disadvantaging, or otherwise killing black people economically, if not physically. I'm just curious if we're going to be seeing a similar ploy. Donald Trump's been in office for 4 years now. And he loves to brag about, I've done this and that for black people. I ain't seen a doggone neighborhood in America that's been improved on his watch. Oh, jobs, more black people working now than ever before. I ain't seen the homeless or the jobless numbers of black people in my city go down one iota. So methinks that the orange man is exaggerating just a tad. But for the last 4 years, what have we seen him do? What kind of contact or interaction has he had with the black community? We've seen him do plenty of attention-whoring stunts. Whenever he's getting some bad press, he'll say some racist stuff about some black Congress people, usually black congresswomen, or what have you. He'll bitch and complain about NFL players, because that's the most important thing that he can be focusing on. He's done plenty of that. Oh, he'll sit there and have some bootlicks like Diamond and Silk before he kicked them out of the White House. Omarosa, some black preachers, he'll go ahead and do that. He's had 4 years to put in place any sort of platinum plan for Black America that he wanted to do. He's had 4 freaking years. What has he done for Black America in 4 years? What has the orange man done for Black America in 4 years? Not a damn thing. Now here he is looking at his poll numbers. They're real shaky. And clearly the Don is getting more than a little bit concerned that the Electoral College isn't going to be able to bail him out this time. So what he's doing is seeing what the white media's been saying, that the Democrats have been losing the support of young black people. Young black people are sitting out the election. Donald Trump's been hearing, he and his advisors have been hearing, and this is their lame brain attempt to crib note what the black media's been saying to try to imitate some of our verbiage, just like Kamala Harris before them. And you've had a number of other individuals, Republicans and Democrats alike, Tom Steyer calling himself, dropping the phrase, cut the check, and I guess he figured we were going to fall at his feet. And he's finding out there's a new generation here. We don't go for lip service. We go for tangibles. The first thing is your words are not tangibles. We're looking at what you're doing, not what you're saying. But Donald Trump is desperately trying to figure out, can he get some momentum going? All those young black people who are sitting out the election, they were the ones who put Barack Obama in the White House twice. If I just say some of this stuff that these new voices of black media have been saying, and what'll happen is they'll look and start gravitating toward me, right? That's what he thinks is going to happen, or what he's hoping is going to happen. So when Donald Trump puts forward his platinum plan, which I'm going to go ahead and dissect for you now, just understand he's not doing it to do anything for black people. It's a pathetic PR stunt. By the way, his platinum plan's got a number of freaking spelling errors and typos in it. The orange man couldn't figure out how to do a dang thing for black people except for have some Negroes standing behind him for a photo op. And here he is in his getting ready to have a second term, and he's showing black people that we are at best an afterthought to him. He didn't do anything for us his first term. This platinum plan, he didn't want to push that during his first term. While he was out there saying build the wall and all the rest of it, he wasn't saying what he was going to do for black people. No platinum plan then. He didn't have that as a plank of his political platform then. And you damn well better believe he ain't saying it to all those screaming crowds of white people that he's talking to in Pennsylvania, Florida, and other mostly white enclaves. He ain't talking about his black plan for Black America in front of them. He ain't mentioning that in front of them. But it's only now that his poll numbers are making him a little bit nervous and he just wants some reassurance that he can shore up some of his support. Now all of a sudden here comes this platinum ploy for Black America. An afterthought, a political afterthought, which gives you some idea of how serious this actually is. Not very. Now keep in mind, you need to be aware of the terms that are going to be used. And I want you to keep this in mind as you hear Trump's proposal. Look at the words that he uses. He's going to be using a whole lot of code words like black leaders. And we all know what that means. That means black puppets and frontmen who white power has chosen to speak for us. Phony new black leaders, like these LGBT spokesmen from Black Lives Matters or what have you, the D. Ray McKessons and such. It means black clergy, like that clown at Brown Chapel AME Church, among others, the Al Sharptons and such. That's what they mean by black leaders. Black consultants, which means you got some black folks who are dependent on white companies in order to give them some consulting fees. Dr. Claude Anderson told you about that particular deficiency that a lot of black folks, especially on the left, happen to have. Black political spokespeople, we're talking about the Simone Mammy Sanders and such. Pseudo-academics, you already know who they are. And other reliable bootlicks, you can see them frequently on white cable TV. These are black, when they say black leaders, that's what they mean. Clergy, reliable black bootlicks, individuals who are on the take, Negroes who are already in white supremacy's hip pocket. Next, you want to be on the lookout for the bait and switch. Oh, Trump will put black in the heading for his little proposal, but let's look and see how long it takes before he starts using these bait and switch terms like minority and urban and immigrant. Let's see how long it is before he does that, because that's what he's really trying to get to. The words that basically make it very clear we ain't talking about black people. We're trying to shoehorn everybody else into this. We're going to say that it's for black people, like affirmative action. And then we're going to start shoehorning in and slipping in all these words that make it where, and everybody else too. Let's see if he keeps it exclusive or if he decides all of a sudden we need to make it as broad as possible using terms like minority, urban, immigrant, etc. And finally, do the policies that Trump proposes specifically spell out what black people will own, what black people will control, and what black people will be able to pass down? Or do his policies suddenly become vague on those points? When it comes time to talk about what black folks are going to have control of, does he get specific or does he get real vague? As I give you the rundown on Trump's platinum ploy for Black America, I want you to keep those particular verbal points and those definitions in mind. Now, when you take a look at the Don's platinum ploy for Black America, he starts off with a 4-point checklist, which is nothing more than empty words: opportunity, security, prosperity, fairness. We already told you fairness is a child's word. Justice is what adults look for. And him bragging about himself, psychologically masturbating himself. Hey man, you diddle your ego on your own time. But this is what he starts off with. Bragging about what he claims to have done for black people, which black people can look out their window or look at their own lives and see this. The orange man ain't done a damn thing for us. Security, all the black folks getting gunned down in the streets, they're real secure now, ain't they? Prosperity, the wealth gap between black and white America is greater now than it's ever been at any point in the country's history. And as for fairness, need I say more? But that's Donald Trump's, that's how he starts off his platinum plan. Patting himself on the back and telling us a bunch of fairy tales about what he claims that he's done for black people. And then beyond that, he has his little checklist of what he promises black people over the course of the next 4 years. Now, if you got even half a brain cell in your head, the very first thing you're supposed to be thinking is, wait a minute. This guy's been in office for 4 years. What the hell has stopped him from doing this in 4 years? Only time he's mentioned black folks up until now is to complain about black folks, whine about black professional athletes, and otherwise get in his racial digs at us. Now all of a sudden he's got a plan for Black America for the next 4 years? Well, Mike Bloomberg said $70 billion was what he was doing. I guess Trump decided to take crib notes from Bloomberg's asinine little economic justice proposals. And he thinks to himself that if he puts a couple of extra zeros on there, that's going to make our hearts go pitter-pat. As if we haven't already crunched the numbers. As if we don't know what we need. He's gonna say a number and we're supposed to go, ooh, wow, that sure does sound like a lot of money, don't it? Now, the first part of Trump's promise to Black America over the next 4 years, increase access to capital in Black communities by almost $500 billion. Now, again, all you'd need do is look no further than what Donald Trump did for Black people in New York City. I cannot expect for Donald Trump to be more generous or solicitous with Black people nationwide if he could not figure out how to do anything for Black people in his own home base. $500 billion. Well, that's certainly a fair sight more than Bloomberg's $70 billion. Only problem is, Martin Luther King was talking about in the billions of dollars back in the 1960s, and he was lowballing it then. In order to get us on an even keel to where we need to be, there's going to have to be a wealth transfer in the trillions of dollars. We have not had $500 billion worth of damage done. Hell, that barely would cover a year of the damage that's been done to us. $500 billion would barely cover that. No, the damage done to us numbers in the trillions, and I don't mean no one or two. That's the reason why reparations starts with $20 trillion. So the Don, he ain't hitting on nothing. And you look at the points of his promises, 3 million new jobs for the Black community. Jobs indeed. Now, family, in my classic video, We're All Detroiters Now, I told you about how, for the longest time, Black people have been playing this game of we need jobs. And with politicians, we've been allowing them to get away with that and say, well, jobs, Black America needs jobs. The problem is that's exactly what we've been getting. Garbage man, hamburger flippers, street sweepers. We've been getting jobs, but that problem is, as Jason Black beautifully put it, a job is the bottom rung of the economic ladder, and we ain't been climbing one rung upward since. What we need are businesses, something that we own, we control, and can pass down, something that gives us a piece of the rock, that puts us in charge of our own lives. Jobs can't do that. You need look no further than the Black automotive workers of Detroit if you want proof of that. But here Trump comes along, 3 million new jobs. Jobs indeed. That's the very first thing that he says. So what does that tell you? As far as he's concerned, this is about jobs. Black America needs 3 million new jobs. 'Cause that's how he thinks. You need to be working for me. Only after that does he actually say creating 500,000 new Black-owned businesses. Now again, Donald Trump ain't said one word in the last 4 years about Black-owned businesses. He has not done anything in that regard. You have not seen Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III or Bill Barr, who has done anything to make sure that Black people are not being discriminated against when it comes to jobs or when it comes to access to capital. These guys have been the proud guardians of anti-Black racism. But all of a sudden, we're supposed to believe that these guys who've been waving the flag for white supremacy high and proud for decades, and most proudly the last 4 years, all of a sudden they're going to be doing something for Black-owned businesses. What the hell have they been doing the last freaking 4 years? Next, he has increased access to capital in Black communities by almost $500 billion. There's some weasel words for you. Increase access to capital. That's a very vague term, family. These are not specifics at all. And $500 million, that's not even going to cut it. If that was a meal, it wouldn't even coat the bottom of my stomach. $500 billion, that's a joke. I mean, that would barely be enough for even one white enclave on the East Coast. But he's talking about this is going to be what the entirety of the Black population of the United States gets. Gee, $500 billion, that's a damn far cry from 20 trillion, don't you think? Now, up until this point, Trump has had black in his proposals. But that's all about to change now, because his next talking point, safe urban neighborhoods with highest policing standards. Safe urban neighborhoods. All urban means is city, inside the city center. That's all urban means. All of a sudden, he ain't saying black. But what he is saying is that the key to safe urban neighborhoods is going to be more police. That means white men with guns. White men with guns and immunity from prosecution. How many cops has Bill Barr or Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III put behind bars? I'll wait. Highest policing standards. No, what that really means is highest amounts of police armament, the most guns and the most surplus military equipment. That's what that really means. So we've already pivoted from black to urban. And that didn't take long now, did it? Next, commit to working on a Second Step Act. You know, if the First Step Act was about anything, you wouldn't need a second one now, would you? Access to better education and job training opportunities. Nothing about businesses. Only about you need to get an education. Yes, you can be saddled with tons of school debt that you can't pay. Job training opportunities. There goes that word job again. Not going to be owning anything, not going to be controlling anything, but if you do happen to get an education and we can't lock you out of the job market, well, you'll be working for somebody else. We're not really focusing on how to get you in the driver's seat. And Trump's next point, give black churches the ability to compete for federal resources for their community. That's not a dog whistle to all of these black pulpit pimps and all these pork chop pastors. That's a foghorn to them. Hey, you black preachers, I know you guys ain't no different than Al Sharpton. I know you guys, you're just like that guy down in Brown Chapel AME. Hey, you turn your back on Bloomberg. Don't turn your back on me. I mean, you turn your back on him because he's a Democrat, right? Hey, I'm going to go ahead and give you some lip service, $500 billion. That'll go mostly to white legislatures and white companies. And maybe if there's anything left over, it'll be going to the Asians and the immigrants and Latinos. But for the black churches, hey, we're going to go ahead and give you guys some hush money. I mean, some faith-based initiative money. We're going to pay you guys, and you're going to get these niggers in line and get them corralled and get them to stop all of this agitating and all of this forcing the system to bend the knee. You're going to get them to do that, right? That's what he means by give black churches fill in the blank. This is meant to tell the black clergy, hey guys, there's something in it for you if you just get behind what I'm doing. If you guys sign on to get black folks to do what I say, if you get out there and make sure you corral these Negroes, there'll be something in it for you. Next, he has bring better and tailored health care to address historic disparities. You want to improve the health care of black people, you improve our economics. A disproportionate number of black people suffer from health problems because of the pure stress of living under constant anti-black oppression, with the state cheerleading and protecting the people who are oppressing and abusing us, and attacking us for standing up for ourselves and doing everything it can to keep us on our knees. You address the economics, that's going to help a lot. But of course, that's not what this is about. Next, we have immigration policy that protects American jobs. Immigration policy. No specifics on that. Immigration policy that protects American jobs. I guess nobody ever told the orange man that black people are not immigrants. And again, his immigration policy, that's not going to have any impact when it comes to a whole bunch of nouveau riche Chinese coming to the United States and buying up land in economically depressed areas, which means black areas. They're doing it in the West Coast right now, but they're going to be moving into the inner cores of the cities and such where the black people are. That's going to be coming sooner rather than later. In many cases, it's already started. You take a look at how black people have been utterly displaced in San Francisco, if you want an example of that. But his immigration policy that protects American jobs. There goes that word jobs again. He's not talking about immigration policy that is going to protect black businesses. Nothing about business, it's just about jobs. I'm going to protect your job. I don't want you working for some foreigners. We want to be the ones who are economically depriving you. Next, advance home ownership opportunities and enhance financial literacy in the black community. Donald Trump inherited his wealth from his father. And it was based on the fact that Fred Trump was plugged into the New York political machine. Donald Trump cannot teach me about financial literacy because he did not make his money himself. His father did due to their government connections. And if you look at how many businesses Donald Trump has had fail, somebody needs to give him a course in financial literacy. Next, onshoring manufacturing to advance jobs and develop opportunities for black-owned businesses. Notice how in every case, black-owned businesses is always an afterthought. When you look at this summary of his promises, you see that he mentions jobs twice as much as he mentions black-owned businesses. He mentions jobs twice as much as he mentions black-owned businesses. And when it comes to the police, he says absolutely nothing about punishing them at all. He doesn't say anything about enforcement. Nothing about what's going to be done to punish those who are harming us or disadvantaging us or killing black people. He doesn't have anything to say about that. So how seriously am I supposed to take his promises? Next, you get to a more detailed version of what he just got through saying, which is just a repetition of the same. Black economic empowerment and access to capital. Black economic empowerment. Okay, there goes black empowerment. You know, I'm not sure if maybe we should be telling Don that he owes us royalties for using our phrases. But he starts off with jobs, jobs, jobs. I guess he just wants to make sure that maybe mentioning the word jobs twice as much as black businesses, for him, that wasn't enough. He wants to make sure that the word jobs completely and thoroughly outnumbers the uses of black-owned businesses in this part. So he starts off with jobs, jobs, jobs. We're talking about black businesses, and all he can think about is jobs, jobs, jobs. Because black people with jobs is not threatening to him. Black people with businesses is. So he starts off with not how we're going to get black people to be in business for themselves so that they can supply jobs to black people. Instead, it's jobs, jobs. We need to have you, if you guys are going to be working for anyone, you're going to be working for us. He goes on to do his phony baloney, patting himself on the back for his imaginary economic, historic levels of employment for black people, which is largely a canard. Talks about infrastructure spending. Can you think of any black people who own any businesses building bridges or roads? Me neither. So infrastructure funding, who the hell is that going to go to? It's going to go to some white people with some white companies. When he talks about infrastructure and onshoring and domestic manufacturing, that's the kind of talk that's going to make white audiences' hearts go pitter-pat because they're the ones who own businesses having to do with those things. Now, if you're black, the only thing that it means for you is that maybe, assuming that they run out of immigrants to hire, then maybe you might get a temporary job working on some road crew, maybe. That's what infrastructure funding means. Grow minority-owned businesses. Well, nice to know that we're doing something for everybody except for black people. Notice how black has dropped out of the discussion at this point. With additional tax cuts to stimulate hiring and investment, encourage onshoring and development of domestic manufacturing, examine barriers to employment. That's just another way of saying jobs. Increase activity in opportunity zones. He doesn't say anything about black neighborhoods. Doesn't say anything about black enclaves. Opportunity zones is just another way of saying places where white real estate developers and white corporations can get some land cheap and be able to take advantage of the fact that black people cannot economically defend themselves from these white economic onslaughts. Opportunity zones, yeah, that means we can take advantage of the black people in those areas. That's what opportunity zones mean. It means an opportunity for white supremacy. But it does put on the end of that, including benefits for local hires. That's another way of saying jobs. Jobs, 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 jobs. That's Donald Trump's plan. You too can work for a white business. Invest almost $20 billion toward broadband and internet access to create job opportunities, improve classroom connectivity. Classroom connectivity. Well, I wonder what his plan for black schools happens to be while he's talking about classroom connectivity, because I know how this is going to help the big white telecoms. I'm sure that broadband, such an internet access is going to be good for the white telecoms. Not so sure how that's going to be enriching black businesses, though. Because you see, there's something you need to understand when it comes to broadband. Who owns the telecommunications companies? Not black people. Keep in mind the problems that we face when it comes to accessing opportunities of the internet. They're mostly manifested at the local level, but the policies are written at the state and federal level. The telecoms have made it where individual cities are prohibited from starting their own internet services. You know, back in the day, in the early 20th century, when you had infrastructure being put in place, mostly electricity and water, you had the cities who could not get private industry to set up electric services in their town. So the cities would do it themselves. And the same thing went for water. You couldn't get companies to actually set up water and irrigation in your town, so the cities did it themselves. But later on, especially the electric companies, they started filing lawsuits to keep cities from setting up their own electric grids. You can't have electricity unless you pay us for it, is what these electric companies were saying. And the same thing has gone for the internet. The telecoms have paid the state legislatures, all 50 states, to write laws making it where cities cannot start their own internet services, because those internet services would be faster and cheaper than what the telecoms do. I told you about the 1996 Telecommunications Act that Bill Clinton passed that gave huge tax breaks to the telecoms, and in return what was supposed to happen was they were supposed to be setting up fiber optic cable so the United States would have the lead in the information superhighway. Instead, what happened was South Korea's got it, Japan's got it, hell, you got places in Russia that have got it, but the United States basically still running around with copper wire, and, well, I guess the telecoms will get around to fiber whenever they get around to it. But in the meanwhile, they've spent the last 25 years enjoying those big, juicy tax breaks and not doing what they claimed they would do, because that's the reason why they were given the tax breaks. It was a trade-off. If we give you these tax breaks, you have to put up fiber. And what the telecoms did was they took the money, laughed to the bank and said, we're not putting up a damn thing. So what's happened now, because the telecoms have paid the individual state legislatures to outlaw local internet services by the municipalities, what you have is a legalized monopoly for the telecoms. And what's happened is, just like I told you about Lysine with Archer Daniels Midland, the telecommunication companies have gotten together to divide up your state or your city into separate turfs, and they do not intrude on one another's turfs. This way they get to have legalized monopolies wherever they are. You're sitting there waiting to see if Time Warner is going to come into the area that Comcast is in, or if Comcast is going to go into the area that Suddenlink is in, or if Suddenlink's going to go into the area that AT&T is in, and none of them are going to do that. They make sure that you never get to have a choice by agreeing amongst themselves that they will not do businesses in one another's areas. Wherever AT&T is at, Comcast ain't touching it, and vice versa. And as a result, they charge sky-high prices for service that doesn't even work half the time and is inferior to anything you would get practically anywhere else in the developed world. And it's impossible to challenge them or to cultivate an alternative because these telecoms have paid the state legislatures, the corrupt politicians in your state capital have been bribed to pass laws that make it illegal for your city to start up an ISP that would actually have fiber optic cable and that would actually charge a fair price. And the lie that the telecoms have used is, this would constitute unlawful competition. Yeah, because a monopoly is not unlawful. You notice how the orange man has nothing to say about that. Ajit Pai and the rest of his cronies at the FCC have nothing to say about that. Next, Trump goes on with better and cheaper health care, affordable care you can trust. Family, let me tell you something. Trump's health care promise is empty and useless words. CNN finally admitted to what we've been saying for decades. Black babies are far more likely to die if they have a white doctor, just like black adults are far likely to die if they're depending on a white healthcare provider. Trump's proposal says nothing about the medical apartheid in America, the systemic exclusions of black Americans from healthcare. We go to the doctors, but we're denied care. They say, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. Take a couple of aspirin. Yeah, you're having a heart attack, but all you really, you're probably just faking it. So black people are given little health care, if not outright refused altogether. Remember when you had that Ebola patient from Liberia, I believe it was, who flew to Dallas in 2015? I want to say that it was 2015. You had that brief Ebola outbreak, like 1 or 2 people got infected. He went to a hospital, by the way. He told them, hey, I just came from Liberia. They got a Ebola outbreak there, and I've got a fever, got chills. I'm having blurry vision. I just got through coming from there. I think I'm infected. You know what they did? They told him, ain't nothing wrong with you. Go on home. You're fine. Well, it turned out old boy was infected. He wound up dying, and another person got infected as well. What are the penalties and the punishments for denying black people health care? There's no such thing under Trump's proposal. Oh, but he does talk about deliver real price transparency so you know the cost before care is received. Well, you got to be able to actually get healthcare insurance before price transparency does you any good. Opportunity to be in charge of your own healthcare and choose your own provider. You notice how Trump doesn't say anything about creating more black doctors and more black-run hospitals and clinics? That would be for us to be in charge of our own health care if we got black people who are the ones providing it. But Trump's plan has nothing about that. And you'll notice that the word black is missing from his healthcare portion. There's one lonely reference to African American populations, but you notice how the word black is missing completely from his healthcare proposals. This is supposed to be a healthcare proposal for black people, a platinum plan for black people, but he can't even muster up the word black in his healthcare portion of it. Now, what does that tell you? Nothing that puts us in charge of our own healthcare. Instead, it's going to be just more money to the same white medical racists, whether it's white insurance companies or white hospitals and racist white doctors who haven't done a damn thing for us in the first place. You see, Donald Trump, this is more of his political psychological masturbation. He wants to eliminate Obamacare because that's a trophy that the Republicans want on their wall. And while I'm no fan of Obama, the truth is that's a political vanity project for the Republicans. It doesn't do anything for us. Obamacare didn't help us, so it's not going to hurt us when it's gone. But the thing is, that's all he's thinking about. He's thinking about it so he can brag in front of the white right and tell them, look, we got rid of that niggas Obamacare. The white man wins again. That's what he's thinking about. Remember what Dr. John Henrik Clarke taught. You make demands of white supremacy that requires it to give up its power. Power is when you're the ones calling the shots. When you have to share power with the white supremacists, that means you're already at a disadvantage. Increase access to telemedicine? Well, the problem is you're depending on these white-run telecoms to be providing you with internet service, and we already know how dodgy that is. Public-private partnerships. Anytime you see that term public-private, when they say private, that means white. Black people have no businesses to speak of, certainly not when it comes to healthcare. So when Trump puts down private, that means white. In fact, that means white across the board, not just in healthcare, but in every other regard. When he says public-private, what that means is the white-run administrative arm of white supremacy, the white government, is going to be in partnership with these white companies, and black people are going to be customers. This is just more of that patronage stuff. You can buy healthcare from a white corporation. You can go to a white doctor. But as far as black doctors and black hospitals and black healthcare insurance providers goes, well, we're not thinking about that. No mention of black in his healthcare proposal. Though he does put in defend religious freedom exemptions to respect religious believers and always protect life. Now, again, that's something that makes the white rights hearts go pitter-pat. But for black people, what the hell is this religious freedom exemptions for? What the hell is that going to be doing for us? Though I did consider it to be amusing that he put in investments into the causes and cures of kidney disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, sickle cell disease, maternal mortality, and other diseases that disproportionately affect African Americans. Notice the wording that he uses. Disproportionately affect African Americans. In other words, there's going to be something for everyone. That's all he just got through saying with that. Something for everyone. This is supposed to be what constitutes a detailed breakdown of his plans. And you notice that he's trying to use the word black as seldom as possible. In a plan that's supposed to be a platinum plan for black people, he's trying to, don't use the word black so much. Next, you got a section that says fueling access to capital for black-owned businesses. Well, finally, we see black-owned businesses in there. All right, then. Well, I'm sure that we're not going to be seeing anything about minorities or what have you, or people of color. I'm sure we're going to be sticking to black-owned businesses because that's what this is about, right? I'm sure we're going to be seeing that, right? Certainly, we're going to be seeing the word black pop up every 5 seconds, right? Wrong. All it says is increase opportunities for small business lending and technical assistance through community development, blah, blah, blah. You know, when it came to the Homestead Act and when it came to the GI Bill, and when it came to housing grants for white men coming back from World War II, and when it came to the Small Business Administration, they weren't making loans, they were making grants. So what that meant was a white man who came back from World War II, he had his education, his house, and his business paid for on the government's dime, and he didn't have to pay back a penny of it. How much capital and time gets freed up when you have the government subsidizing your home, which means that you get to have generational wealth just handed to you, subsidizing your first business and subsidizing your education? Black people were systematically shut out of that. Black GIs coming back from World War II, no GI Bill for you, no housing grants for you, and SBA, get the hell out of here. That's what happened to black folks. He comes up to us, well, we're going to talk about small business lending. Because you better believe whatever white bank you get some money from, you're going to have to pay it back with interest. Does this sound like something that's supposed to be empowering black people, or does it seem like a Trojan horse that's going to empower white businesses on Wall Street? Oh, he's going to create generational wealth opportunities with over $400 billion in lending. Is this supposed to be part of that $500 billion that we were told about before? Because it seems like $100 billion suddenly got dropped. Examine alternative ways to build credit, including rent and who you're going to be renting from. Oh, I'm sure there's going to be some black landlords, right? Utilities. And who are you going to be getting your electricity, water, and internet service from? And phone bills. Well, I just got through covering that part. Make the Minority Business Development Agency permanent. The Minority Business Development Agency. Well, I'm sure that Kamala Harris and the Latino caucus, I'm sure they'll be very, very pleased to hear that. And create a sub-office of African American Affairs. Now, if he were serious about that and actually put real power in his hands to get things for us, that'd be one thing, but we all know what that means. It's just like AFRICOM. This is going to be like, if he actually had that, it would be the domestic version of AFRICOM. You'd have some person, probably black, who would be telling black people why we got an Office of African American Affairs and we're going to be hearing your complaints and not doing a damn thing about it. And you get to bask in the warm glow of knowing that there's an Office of African American Affairs. You guys are all about ego, right? We've been hearing you guys saying for years now that they don't say black. And what about an office dealing with black people? Well, we're going to set up an office in name, but it's not actually going to do anything. And how do we know it's not going to do anything? Because next it says, engage with private sector advisors. Private sector advisors. Notice how you're not seeing the word black when it comes to this stuff. We're staying away from the word black. We're going to keep it minority, private sector. That's what we're doing here. Next talking point, increase the number of black-owned contracting businesses, financial services entities, and private equity investment funds through regulatory reform. What the hell's he been doing for the last 4 freaking years? There is absolutely nothing that he's named that he has not had the ability to do in the last 4 years. You know, maybe if the orange man had spent a little less time bitching about NFL and NBA players and a little more time telling his staffers we need an Office of African American Affairs and we're going to start making sure that these banks do right by black people. We need to have grants for black businesses. Maybe if that's what he focused on, instead of bitching and complaining about who was or wasn't taking a knee for the national anthem, maybe he wouldn't be coming up to us with these asinine, empty proposals this late in the game. There's nothing that he's named here that he has not had more than enough time to do. Maybe a little less time golfing at Mar-a-Lago, huh? Just an idea. Next, advance lending relationships with financial institutions. Lending. Yep. More debt. You niggers aren't in enough debt. Host senior executives from major financial institutions. Yeah, like Goldman Sachs. You know, those white institutions that black folks can't even be part of. JP Morgan Chase, that kind of thing. Yeah, senior executives, they can show up and see what opportunities they're going to have in the black community. That's what that means. Oh, and by the way, for those of you keeping score, you'll notice that in his portion about fueling access to capital for black-owned businesses, once you get past that header, you notice how the word lending shows up 3 times. The word black only shows up twice. And when it comes to the private sector, he's got that in there a number of times as well. This is mostly about how the private sector is going to have access to whatever the government's planning to do to the black community. If we're doing something with the black community, we're going to make sure that there's going to be white financial institutions there and senior executives from these white major financial institutions and private sector advisors. Man, he puts that all throughout there. We're going to have all of these white corporations who ain't done a damn thing for black people, who have been the main ones redlining us and everything else, discriminating against us economically. And now we're going to make sure that we set up a program that's going to be funneling more money to them. Next comes Trump's sop to law enforcement. Because after all, Donald Trump ain't done a doggone thing to punish the thugs with badges, and he just wants to make sure that that continues. Safe streets. Oh, so we're going to make sure that the thugs with badges go to prison. Right? Wrong. Make historic improvements to the criminal justice system through common sense actions like the First Step Act, including increased use of drug rehabilitation versus drug incarceration. You know, at some point you would expect that the orange man would ask, hey, how come the Republicans have got control of the Senate and they're not just flooding the zone with one proposal after the next to alleviate all of this hyper-incarceration of black people? You would think that he would be calling Mitch McConnell on the carpet about that. Hey, how come we're not getting a raft of legislation that's going to be making it where low-level offenders happen to get set free? Because these are people who are in there mostly because of the drug laws. And hey, while we're at it, why don't we make sure that all of these black people who have been kept from voting, we're going to go ahead and correct that too. Because God knows if we're not going to be doing this to white people, we shouldn't be doing it to black people. He's had every chance for 4 years to do it and ain't done a damn thing. And his party has been talking nothing but, oh, we can't do that. So what makes you think if he ain't done it in 4 years, if he has a party that is adamantly opposed to it, all of a sudden it's going to happen now in his lame duck term? Announce a national clemency program. Again, where the hell's this been for the last 4 years? What stopped him from announcing a clemency program for the last 4 years? He's the president. He's got the power to pardon people, but the only people that he's pardoning are Roger Stone and Michael Flynn. He's pardoning them, but he ain't pardoning anybody else. We're going to focus on wrongful prosecution and rehabilitation. Gee, just out of curiosity, how much did Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III and Bill Barr have to say about that? Oh, Bill Barr did say that Jacob Blake was a criminal and that Jacob Blake was reaching for a weapon and he was armed and dangerous. He did say that. Wrongful prosecution. Only prosecution he was concerned about was Roger Stone and Vince Flynn. Those only prosecutions he's been concerned about. Black people, not so much. And restore safety to Americans. And by the way, look at the typos here. Restore safety to Americans, great cities, by working with police departments. He puts police departments first. That lets you know where his thinking is at. We're going to be going to the cops to figure out what to do about you niggers. That's what that means. Community leaders. Okay, great. That means we get to have some of these pork chop preachers get to stand behind Trump and some thug with a badge, be it the police chief or the sheriff, and explain to black people why the latest shooting that's taken place, all these killings of black people, you guys don't need sit on your hands. Don't do anything about it. You just accept it. That's just your lot in life. And you're going to be having the D. Ray McKessons and such doing their empty words and saying, vote for the Democrats, as they try to figure out how to finagle some sort of government job for themselves. Can I get a staff position in Joe Biden's administration? That kind of crap. And mental health professionals. What that means is white people with psychology or psychiatry degrees. That's all that means. I've already told you about how black people are completely and thoroughly locked out of healthcare in America. So when it comes to talking about mental health, that will be treated no differently than medical health. There's going to be some white people who are going to get caked off. Probably a number of new government agencies for them that they're going to be running and they're going to get paid from and such. And what they'll be doing is saying, well, there's nothing we can do about these latest shootings that have taken place. And, well, it was a good shoot. These are going to be rubber stamp committees for all of the killings of black people that they're planning to carry out. And what about the police? What's going to be done to them? Because after all, shouldn't we be able to agree that the police are out of control? Well, Trump's got you covered there too. His plan for the police? Diversity training. Oh, and accreditation standards. That's the new weasel word that's been kicked around the last few months. Nothing about how the federal government's going to step in and make it where in order for somebody to be accredited as a police officer, well, we're going to make that a federal thing now. Or at the very least, we're going to make it where the federal government says, hey, if you don't meet our standards and make it where all 50 states have to do it so we can punish the police and, hey, you do one bad act in one town, we're going to make it where you can't even be a security guard at Toys R Us. Make it where you're going to be going after the police. Instead, what's his proposal? Diversity training. Yeah, sounds just like Kamala Harris, doesn't it? But you notice in Trump's proposal, the word that's missing from this portion? Black. Yeah, when it comes to safe streets, black people are nowhere in mind, though he does make sure to mention police a few times. We want to make sure the police are mentioned a few times. That's what safe streets means. More white supremacist thugs with badges and are going to be having increased immunity from prosecution. Whatever few strides you think you guys are making at the local and state level, we're going to be trying to take up the slack for the thugs with badges at the federal level. That's what it means. Install the most responsive, professional, and accountable models of policing. Responsive meaning we're going to have more money for radios for police, more thugs with badges on the streets. Professional meaning that they're going to have more computerized systems, more sophisticated means of being able to go after and harm black people. And accountable models of policing. Accountable, that word simply means we're going to have more press conferences. So more guns, more military equipment, and more immunity, and we'll be keeping you we'll do a better job of keeping you updated on all the black people that we're killing. That's what that means. We did not ask for accountability, we demand incarceration. That's the only accountability I'm interested in. Diversity training? Yeah, we can make sure that these cops have a lot of diversity training. You need to learn how to avoid getting shanked in the yard. You should also get some training on how to avoid dropping the soap in the prison shower. You'll need a diversity of skills so you can make it in your new abode. Your new digs that we're putting you in can be a little bit rough from time to time. So we're gonna make sure you get some diversity training. Oh, you're going to be really diversely trained when it comes to making it on cell block D through the day. You'll be getting real used to solitary confinement because that'll be the only safe place for you in the prison. That's maybe. But that's the only diversity training that I'm interested in for the police. That is what the black grassroots through the black media has been demanding when it comes to dealing with the police. That's our safe streets policy. And if you're not talking about punishing the police, then you shouldn't be talking. So family, you see, especially for the slow coast out there, the brain dead morons who are nothing more than Democrat Party shills and plants. And most of them white, by the way, a lot of them white people. How come you don't say anything about Trump? I'm saying something about Trump now, and I'm also pointing out how the Democrats, their proposals are no different than his. You notice how the similarities between the two parties far outweigh the differences. Mike Bloomberg's proposal, just like Kamala Harris's proposal, just like Joe Biden's proposal, just like Bernie Sanders' proposal, just like Donald Trump's proposal. Not that they're actually going to be following through on any of it. None of this stuff's actually supposed to be followed through on. It's just a matter of they're putting this here in front of you. The point is not to actually get any of this stuff done. It's just so that you are going to be looking at it and saying, oh, wow, they actually said something about black people. See, they actually mentioned black. This is what we said. No, we didn't say just say black. Saying black is just the beginning. You're not getting away with that trick. Because that's what this is supposed to be. We said black. See, we said black. We heard what these guys online have been saying. See, we said black. Yeah, then you immediately pivoted to minority, private, police, lending. We see the scam, okay? You're not fooling anybody. Now, what about education? Because Trump was talking earlier about more classroom connectivity. So now let's talk about those black classrooms. Trump's proposal: close failing schools. That's his proposal. Now, you notice he doesn't say anything about close failing police departments, close failing sheriff's departments. Why? The crime is out of control in these areas. We should close the police departments. They're not getting the job done, just close them. And we'll replace them with something else. But we got to close these police departments. No, nobody ever says that if the police are not making certain performance benchmarks, that they should be fired. Nobody says that about the police. Because everybody knows that for every school you close, it is a mathematical fact, you have to open one prison for every school that you close. And when Trump talks about closing failing schools, he's not talking about propping the schools up. Let's give them the funding that they need. If standards have to be changed, so be it. But he's not talking about let's keep the schools open. He's talking we need to close these schools. This is a sop to Betsy DeVos and her little school scam that she's got going. We're going to close these failing schools. Yeah, because, black kids spend far too much time in school, don't you know? And we're going to replace it with more schools? No, we're going to replace it with full school choice. In other words, contracts for private schooling companies like Betsy DeVos. Not that that's going to do black people any good. It's going to decrease educational opportunities for black people who don't have enough to begin with. And it's going to be a gigantic check written to white schooling companies. That's all it's going to be about. Close schools, and we ain't replacing them with anything. See, I can understand how that helps the white right, but I'm having some trouble figuring out how that helps black people. Isn't he supposed to be talking about opening schools that black people own and run? Shouldn't he be talking about that? If the schools are failing, in that case, then it looks like it's the right time for some black-run schools with a black curriculum. But he's not talking about that. You see the scam here, don't you? Next, education African Americans can afford. Continue to protect the vital role of HBCUs. Man, you could have kept that stupid proposal to yourself. Spur innovation ecosystems. What the hell does innovation ecosystem even mean? See, one of those phrases that means nothing. By connecting minority institutions. Now, I thought we were talking about African American education, and here we've already pivoted to minorities. Look at that. Increase the amount of Pell Grants. Pell Grants is money that goes to schools, all of them white-owned, white-controlled. So more money for these white-owned, white-run educational institutions. That's what that means. Allow for vocational employment. Vocational means that you work for somebody else. You're learning a craft or a trade, which means you work for somebody else. Nothing about transitioning from working for someone else to having your own. And second change homecomers. I think he meant second chance homecomers. This is supposed to be a professionally done proposal for black people. I mean, it's got a freaking bunch of typos and errors here. I would hope that Trump's pals at the very least would have sobered up before trying this PR ploy. I would have hoped that they at least would have sobered up first. I guess they tied one on over at Mar-a-Lago, getting sloppy drunk, falling out of their chairs, sniffing coke off a hooker's rump while they're sitting here typing up this gibberish. Advanced targeted apprenticeship and job training programs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. That's his favorite freaking word. But again, you notice in the portion about education African Americans can choose, whomever the orange man got to type up this nonsense for him, they only managed to mention the word black one time. You can tell these are some white folks who are very uncomfortable with the word black. You can tell they were like, do we have to say black so much? Come on. You can tell that they're looking at this the whole time going, geez, in between their bouts of momentary sobriety while they were going in and out of their drunken stupor. They looked and said, do we have to say black so much? They only managed to mention the word black one time in this educational portion. Yeah, the closer you get to the end of this thing, the less the word black shows up. However, they did make sure to mention that they want to put American parents back in control over their children's futures. He doesn't even say African American. Whoever Trump got to type this up, they couldn't even say put African American parents back in control over their children's futures. Just says put American parents. These guys are so addicted to their white pride speak when they're tailoring their speech for a white audience. They bring that stuff to black people and don't even understand. We can see right through it. So this is what Donald Trump's got in mind when it comes to black education. Close the schools. And what few schools will be left, well, your choices will be to make Betsy DeVos and her chums rich. That's what you'll have. Oh, there'll be something for some HBCUs, which are being currently filled up with a bunch of immigrants and such. And there'll be something for minority institutions. We're just going to be more direct about that part. But that's his plan. And finally, prosperous black communities. Now, of course, first thing I'm going to ask is, what did Donald Trump, the real estate mogul, did he do anything to help create or to otherwise promote prosperous black communities in New York or Vegas or Florida or anywhere else where he's put his orange hand at? He's had lots of contact with black people, but how many black communities have benefited from anything that Donald Trump's done? If he couldn't, just like with Bloomberg, if this guy couldn't figure out how to create some prosperous black communities in New York, I'd be a damn fool to think that he's going to do it for black people nationwide. He certainly hasn't done it the last 4 years. Champion federal policy reforms to advance home ownership initiatives. Federal policy reforms. What does that even mean? It means whatever they want it to mean. But in practice, it will mean absolutely nothing. Partner with local leaders in black communities. Okay, Pastor Porkchop, the D. Ray McKessons, and some of these Negroes that you see on TV, local leaders, mostly meaning black clergy. We're going to see if we can give the Porkchop preachers a new lease on life. Yeah, they're largely irrelevant. Black people, especially black youth, have turned their backs on these pulpit pimps. But Trump's going to see if, buy these guys a Lexus or something, or let them stand behind the president while he gives some windblown speech which is all about nothing. And we'll see if we can take some orders from them, because you better believe that's what's going to be happening. The pork chop preachers are going to be sock puppets, repeating whatever Trump tells them to say. And they're going to say, well, what the black community needs is, wait, Mr. President, let me look at these notes that you gave me so I can tell black folks what it is that we need. Oh, yes, more money for Betsy DeVos, and more money for Goldman Sachs, and more money for the rest of these Wall Street crooks that Trump likes to bump elbows with. That's what the black community wants. Mr. President, when are you going to start making these white companies more rich? That's what the black community really wants. When are you going to make these white companies more rich? That's what these local leaders are going to be saying. It's going to be a stage-managed production where he brings on some pulpit pimp and his chosen whore who may or may not have some sort of divinity degree, though he will have a megachurch. He's going to say that whatever it is that Trump wants for white power, that's what the black community wants. And it'll be a little show saying some black leaders were endorsing Trump's proposal, and this is what the black community wants, and clearly the black community, just like with Bill Clinton. Well, the reason I had to lock up all those black people in the 90s was, well, it was those black preachers who told me to do it. They were the ones who told me to do it. And what did Joe Biden say? Well, the reason the 94 crime bill, most of those proposals came from black preachers, It was the black preachers who said that, And Kamala Harris, I've got black neighbors and they would come to me and they would say, Kamala, we need your help. They always put it on the black community somehow, especially black preachers, as their cover, their smoke screen. That's going to be their deflection when they get called out on this. Well, it was the black preachers who told us to do it. So that's what partner with local leaders means. Some black preachers. We're going to see if we can get these guys dialed in for a few more years of pseudo-relevancy. Next, make Juneteenth a national holiday. Dr. Joseph Ben Yakinen said it best. When a people know who they are, they don't ask for a holiday, they take a holiday. This is what Dr. King was talking about in his 3 Evils speech. White supremacy doesn't have a problem with giving Dr. King a holiday because they can do that for free. They don't have a problem with integrating a lunch counter because they can do that for free. This is what the well that Donald Trump's drawing from. I'm going to do something that's not going to cost white supremacy any money. There will be no transfer of wealth. Juneteenth is a holiday, something for free, something that costs white supremacy nothing. And by the way, Juneteenth is a national holiday. There's a number of things that the black community has been talking about for the longest time. Where on the list does Juneteenth as a recognized national holiday rank? Where does Juneteenth rank at? What does that have to do with power, wealth, and influence? How many times have we talked about, Juneteenth needs to be a national holiday? That's what we really need. Tokens, gestures, that's what this is about. The hood rats and the dusty dudes and the civil rights burnouts, who basically are looking for any excuse they can have for a holiday, for a cookout. Those clowns will be impressed by this. The rest of us who still have at least 2 brain cells to rub together, this means nothing to us. But that's what he's bringing. He's bringing empty talk. Oh, but here is something that Trump slipped in there that he wants. Prosecute Antifa as a terrorist organization. And lynching, which is more of that LGBT stuff. We've been telling you about that too. The LGBT community wants to make it where if you even look at an LGBT person the wrong way, if you refuse their sexual advances, that's lynching. That's lynching. That's what lynching as a national hate crime means. If these guys were serious about anything, you don't even need lynching laws to go after the thugs with badges, or to go after these white supremacists who have been attacking black people, or to go after any white supremacist organization. What's lacking is the fact that the federal government doesn't want to do that. And you notice how I left out prosecute the KKK. Trump don't give a damn about the KKK. Didn't he say before and after the Charlottesville massacre, Trump was saying he didn't know anything about any white supremacists. David Duke, I don't know anything about that. So the man who has been spending the last 4 years talking about how he doesn't know anything about any white supremacists, And if there are any white supremacists, well, there's very fine people on both sides. The guy who's been saying that, now he's telling you that he wants to prosecute the KKK after years of professing that he doesn't know anything about any white supremacist organizations, and I don't know anything about any KKK endorsements, and David Duke's part of the KKK. I don't know anything about that. Now all of a sudden he's going to prosecute the KKK? Really? You believe that? No, what this is about is Donald Trump trying to use black people's legitimate grievances as a smokescreen to go after his political opponents. Antifa is what that's about. This is going to be a sop to the white right. It's going to be all about Antifa, and you better believe the first time that there's some arrests made against Antifa, you better believe he's going to make sure that it's black people who are going to be in front of those cameras. Oh, he's going to make sure we're going to put a black face on Antifa, or at the very least, we're going to make it where it's understood that it's some rowdy white kids who are doing this on behalf of Black Lives Matters. See, all of those protests against the police and burnings and such, they were doing it for black people. And this is what happens when a white person decides they're going to do anything that threatens, that's off code. You do anything that seems like it's promoting what black people want, we're going to make an example out of you. That's what it is. Antifa is going to be used as an umbrella term for any and all black people or white people who are doing anything that's seen as politically threatening to entrench white power. You're just Antifa. Because that's what the white right wants. And this is going to be a Trojan horse to try to get that as an official policy. Under the guise that, oh, well, see, we mentioned the KKK too. As I posted on Twitter, the KKK is largely, to all intents and purposes, not completely, but they are largely a relic. The white supremacists have already moved on to the alt-right and Adam Waffen and the Boogaloo Boys and the Proud Boys and the Dumb Boys and the Moron Boys and the Mayo Munchers and the rest of these other groups of packs of assorted degenerates. They've already moved on to other organizations. The KKK, that would have been cute in the 80s or even as late as the 90s, but the white supremacists with the rise of the internet, they've already reorganized themselves under different organizations. And Trump ain't saying nothing about them, is he? He's not saying, I'm going to go after Adam Waffen as a terrorist organization. The FBI already flirted, albeit briefly, with the idea of the Proud Boys as a terrorist group, or at least a hate group anyway. He's already talked about the Proud Boys as a hate group. They flirted with that idea very briefly before Jefferson Beauregard Sessions said, oh, you're not going to be locking up my nephews. And Trump is not saying anything about going after them, not going to designate the Proud Boys as a terrorist organization, or Adam Waffen, or the Boogaloo Boys. I told you about how you had that white supremacist in Minneapolis who was identified by name. He was the guy who was part of not one but two white supremacist motorcycle gangs and a white supremacist prison gang. Not designating any of them as terrorist organizations, though they were the ones responsible for starting these riots, at least in Minneapolis. So you better understand what it is that Trump really means when he says this stuff. He's just giving himself rhetorical cover for trying to say that anyone and everyone who demands that the police be punished, or otherwise who were taken to the streets to seek justice, well, these guys are Antifa. This is supposed to be a bank shot. A political bank shot. An end run. And if somebody says, hey, you're singling them out, well, why? I said I would prosecute the KKK. Who the hell's a KKK? When's the last time some idiots in some dirty bed sheets and some dunce caps have been running around doing anything? No. What's happened is these guys have basically transitioned into militias and paramilitary groups, no different than what you find in Latin America. And the police, who Donald Trump wants to give sensitivity training to, they're out there shaking hands with these guys, doing their white supremacist quote-unquote okay symbols, and having friendly conversations with them and telling white supremacist thugs like Kyle Rittenhouse, you guys are doing a good job, keep up the good work. Oh, they're saying that to the white supremacist thugs with guns on the streets. Yeah, prosecute the KKK, but you're not talking about prosecuting the police. You're not talking about prosecuting militia groups. But then again, why should he? Barack Obama wasn't talking about it, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris aren't talking about it either. So you notice the complete consistency across the board. There are clearly certain subjects and certain groups that both political parties are looking at and going, these are off limits. So you better understand Trump's little proposal to prosecute the KKK for what it is. In practice, ain't going to be no mention of that. Antifa, sure, and that's what he's really concerned about. This is going to be a matter of we're going to try to get that on the board, and we're going to use this phony, insincere, clearly fraudulent, empty promise to prosecute the KKK. That's going to be used as rhetorical cover. So when people point out that we're clearly not doing anything about white supremacist groups, we'll say, well, we said we were going to go after the KKK, you know. But the KKK is largely gone, or at the very least, they're laying low, so what can we do? Next, you got fuel black farmers and access to healthy foods to address food disparities. Fuel black farmers. Again, what do these words mean? Being kind of vague, using strange language. Address food disparities. Is this anything like food deserts, I wonder? Favorable trade deals to bring back manufacturing jobs. Knew it wouldn't be long before his favorite word showed up. We're going to bring back manufacturing jobs and health black contractors. I've never heard of a black health contractor. Have you? Is this anything like Doctors Without Borders or anything? I think whatever reprobate drunk or whatever inebriated addict, meth head that Trump had typed this gibberish up, I think they meant to type out help black contractors. But you see, there's a bunch of freaking typos in this freaking thing. This is not a serious proposal. Trump's platinum plan couldn't even afford a 2-cent spell or grammar check. You got computer programs that do that for you automatically, but apparently that was too much effort for Trump's team. Defend religious liberty and African American churches. You want to make sure that those local leaders get caked off. That lift the conscience of our nation. Can you think of any time that Donald Trump has had anything good to say about any black preacher? Lift the conscience of the nation. You don't need black preachers for that. You got the black community that has been the moral vanguard of this country for 500 years and systematically ignored, oppressed, and abused for 500 years. You cannot lift the conscience of a nation that has no conscience. Lift the conscience. That's psychological masturbation for white people. Whoever was typing this up was like, you can't be implying that the nation's racist. By the way, if Trump wants to be taken seriously, he's talking about eliminating what he terms as being singling out white people and demonizing white people when it comes to federal training programs. Why, you're teaching that white people are inherently racist. Well, in that case, then what about your so-called diversity training for police? What are you going to be teaching them? You need to use different types of bullet rounds when you're shooting the niggas. A lot of you guys out here just stick with 9mm rounds. There's different types of rounds. You need a diversity of weapons on hand. Not just you're just sticking to the one. You got a diversity of weapons. That's what it means. So Donald Trump, apparently he opposes diversity training at the federal level, but he's all for it at the local level for the police. You see how his proposals contradict themselves. But you can guess which proposals he's actually going to follow through on and which ones he won't. And finally, collaborate with cities and counties to address mental illness and substance abuse. Cities and counties. Collaborate with cities and counties when it comes to mental illness and substance abuse. Now, black people's numbers are occasionally significant at the county level, though most counties in America are still majority white. Same thing with states. That's the reason why you see them talking about states' rights. Because it's a matter of, too many of these cities have already reached a tipping point when it comes to black population numbers. So we need to start going to larger scale areas, whether it be the county or whether it be statewide or regional, something where black people's numbers are largely diluted, where whites have the advantage. That's what it means. So this is Donald Trump's platinum ploy for black America. Yeah, it sounds like the crap that Bloomberg had. I mean, these guys are just copying and pasting the same crap from each other because the whole idea is to get black people hot and bothered and excited about voting for nothing. But when you read the plans, what you see is, no, it's just the same old snake oil, the same old Trojan horses, the same old minority, immigrants, people of color, etc., etc. These are Trojan horses that are hiding nothing more than hundreds of billions of dollars for the Betsy DeVosses and the Halliburtons and all of these white construction companies and concerns. And there's going to be a pat on the back for some black preachers and I don't know, maybe they're going to be giving some of these right-wing nut black conservatives, phony Republicans that you see, maybe they're going to be given some sort of job, some sort of alleged cabinet position. We're going to have an office in the White House, an office of Negro affairs, and we're going to get Candace Owens to run it. That kind of crap. I mean, that's going to be Trump's proposal, and the police are going to get more money, and they're going to get diversity training, maybe. And we're going to be going after Antifa, definitely. And we're going to be closing the schools. And don't look for any black doctors or hospitals. We ain't doing that. But maybe there can be something for black people to choose what white racist doctor they want to go to or what white racist hospital they want to die at, that they want to be denied health care from. You can choose what white supremacist denies you health care. A proposal for Black America that barely mentions the word black at all. This is Donald Trump's plan. Now, I said all that to say this. The fact that Donald Trump felt that he had to do this says a lot. Yeah, we know the plan is a pack of lies and it's not serious, but what is serious is that this is an admission on their part. They've heard what we've been saying. They've seen the impact that we're having on this election. Black people saying that we're going to be disengaging from the voting booth. And they see black folks in the streets and they're making it very clear. There's going to be changes done by alternative means. That's what I believe it was Otto von Bismarck said. Warfare is nothing more than the continuation of politics by alternative means. When people abandon the ballot box, they start going for other boxes that don't have ballots in them. So what's happening is the political infrastructure is looking and saying, okay, we're not putting black on the ballot, but we want you to think that we are. They've heard what we've said. When is black going to be on the ballot? See, this is for Black America. See, but you can't say black's not on the ballot. No, actually I can, because I don't see black very much in here at all. And what I see is Donald Trump spelling out to us what it is that he will or will not do. This is not our agenda. This is his. But nonetheless, it just goes to show by staying the course and doing what we've done, this is what the Republican candidate for president has been forced to do. The Democrats, they're so scared, they're like, we can't even afford to propose any of this stuff. They're like, oh, forget this. This is the reason why what we do is important. This is the reason why what we are doing matters. The conversations that we have here that you guys disseminate and proliferate around, they're being heard. Yes, this is a con game, but the fact that they even had to do this, it tells us a lot about what's going on in the halls of power. Those articles being written about young black people in particular, what that says is this is what the political future of the country is going to look like. And the young black people are already looking and going, nah, that ballot box ain't going to do it for us. And the Republicans are playing a game of, we're going to pretend to be speaking some of that black stuff, but it's going to be a bait and switch. No, it won't, because we're not falling for it. We know what our interests are, and we're not compromising on it. You're not going to get us to say, well, okay, we'll sign on to some of this stuff. Okay, granted, it wasn't what we wanted at all, and a lot of it, we already know that it's going to be a sop to white companies, and black folks might get a few jobs, maybe, but we're going to sign on to it because you're finally mentioning us. No, that codependent crap, that's what the black baby boomers did. Gen X and the millennials and Generation Z, we're not doing that. It's a brand new day. It's a brand new trend. You're not going to give us lip service. Because while you're sitting here giving phony baloney talk about jobs and HBCUs and black churches, we see what you're doing. You're ignoring what we told you, and there will be consequences for that. So family, go ahead and take a bow. The orange man, he's put himself in a situation now where he thinks that black people are going to be his salvation, or rather white supremacy's salvation. He's wrong on both counts. Donald Trump's platinum plan for Black America is nothing more than a nickel-plated con game. And we're not falling for it.